Hello, audience. It's about a week later, and I've spent most of that time just researching this thing to figure out what it is and try to become an expert on typical modifications people do with Turbo 400s. And I have some good news. First of all, these transmissions are surprisingly easy to research. There's a lot of information, a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of websites that cover them, which is quite a contrast from the Ford-O-Matic. When I was researching that, it seemed like I was the only one in the known universe who had one. So what I discovered is this is not quite as messed up as I thought it was. So I bought a few parts. I bought an outside seal kit, a new set of check balls, a new filter, and a few other things. And we're just going to clean this up and reassemble it and see what happens. We'll start with the housing and the running gear that's still inside it. I've decided I'm not going to take it apart any further than this. Not just because it's more work, but there's a few good reasons. One, to take the clutch assemblies apart and put them back together and do it safely requires tools I don't have. And two, they all have lip seals in them, and those are really easy to tear during assembly, even when you're being careful. And I would feel really dumb if I took this completely apart and found out there was nothing wrong with it, and then damaged one of the seals trying to put it back together. There are two clutch assemblies still in this that are hydraulically activated, so what I'm going to do is air test them, and if they work, I'm just going to start reassembling it. Alright, I have about 80 psi of air pressure, and I'm wearing safety glasses for this, because this can spray fluid everywhere. Now, what we want to hear is a very definite thud when we apply air to it, with little to no leaks. Now, if it does leak air internally, depending on what transmission it is, that might be normal. Some of these seals are deliberately made to leak slightly because the fluid lubricates parts around it, but it should still easily apply the clutch. So let's try it. Perfect. Also perfect. We'll start with the rear servo. Here's the piston. Has a square cut rubber seal. There was nothing really wrong with any of this stuff. Probably didn't need to take it apart. The accumulator piston actually goes inside the servo itself, and this uses metal rings for seals. This one interlocks, and it's got one for the outside. I'm going to reuse the old gasket because I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And to reassemble all this, I'm going to use Vaseline as assembly lube because they told us in college that you can. And I've done it before and it's been working. Okay, it looks like the accumulator has to be installed in the servo piston, and then they both go to the housing together. There we go. And now the front servo which also uses a metal ring for a seal. And here's the valve body. Took it completely apart to inspect everything. And like I said, everything I know on these is based on what I've seen or read on the internet in the past couple of days. So if I say something that doesn't sound quite right, don't take my word for it. Research it on your own. I took all the valves and springs out to see if they've been replaced or if they match up with the chart for the originals. This valve typically gets replaced. Most shift kits have a version of this that doesn't have this shoulder on it, and apparently some people grind these off. This is the original and none of that's happened, so that hasn't been modified. Some people, they reconfigure the springs and stuff like that. All of these, the valves and springs came out in exactly the way they should. The only thing that looks questionable to me is this spring, which came out here. It's painted green, and all the others are bare metal. And typically aftermarket springs are color coded, so this might be a replacement. I don't know. If it is, it might be a stock replacement, might not be. Either way, I'm just going to reuse it. Another thing I wanted to do was examine these valves. Because one problem automatics can have is if any bits of bearing or gear get into the valve body, they can gall up the valves and then they can get jammed in place and then they don't move. That wasn't the case with this. All the valves move freely. One thing I'd like to point out is I didn't start taking any of these valves out until I had a chart that showed me where they all go, what order they go in, and what direction. Even still, when I took them apart, I kind of grouped them all together in the general area of where they came out, just so I don't have to sort that out later. Like I mentioned before, this passage has been blocked off. This is an accumulator, and according to the internet, what you're supposed to do when you block this off is remove the spring and throw it away. They didn't do that. They left the spring in place. Goes together like that. Now, since the spring is still here and it appears to be the stock one, what I'm going to do is punch this out, or at least punch a hole in it so this is functional again. Then I'm going to clean up the valve body and reassemble it. And I got that done. As you may have guessed, I didn't film it because I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing, and it wasn't easy, but I did get it out, and I managed to clean everything up. So now we'll begin reassembling it.